I'd now like to introduce our first presenter, Kelly Lees, Tocal Honeybee Education Officer. Thank you.
Welcome to Tocal College Beekeepers Field Day. I'm Kelly Lees, Education Officer Honeybees for the New South Wales DPI and Tocal College. And today I want to talk to you about Varroa mite. Varroa is a parasitic mite of the genus Apis, or honeybees, which includes Asian honeybees and European honeybees. Originally it was a parasite of Apis cerana, the Asian honeybee. Now, Varroa and Apis cerana have had hundreds of thousands of years to build up a stable host-parasite relationship. It's had Varroa for a long time, so Asian honeybees have developed a suite of behaviours to cope with having Varroa in their colonies, including absconding and swarming. But these behaviours make them unsuitable for the style of beekeeping that we use in the West, which is why we have the European honeybee, which is more amenable to being kept in hives. Now, we now have Varroa on all inhabited continents. Australia was the last remaining continent until it was detected in June 2022, and Varroa has now been declared endemic in New South Wales. It's here to stay, and now we have to live with it. European honeybees haven't had Varroa for very long, less than 50 years. So they haven't had a long time to build up a host of behaviours like Asian honeybees have to cope with Varroa. So it causes quite heavy impacts on European honeybees. They're just not ready to deal with it as well as Asian honeybees yet. So it's a very recent jump across to European honeybees. How does Varroa work within a hive? Well, it only takes one foundress mite. So a bee returning to a colony will bring back a Varroa mite, often hidden between the abdominal segments and often underneath, so you don't see it come in. That foundress mite, once she's inside the hive, jumps off that adult bee and finds an uncapped brood cell. Now, Varroa have preference for drone brood cells because they're capped for a bit longer and they're just a bigger larvae to feed on. However, a colony that has a lot of worker brood will compete with the mites for the drone brood. So you'll always have a big mite load if you've got a strong colony because there's lots of brood cells for the Varroa to choose from. So that mite will go into that open brood cell. She will go down and burrow into the brood food at the bottom of the cell and she'll hide until that cell is capped. Once that cell is capped, the Varroa mite will emerge and she will start laying eggs. She will also commence feeding on that larvae, so injuring that larvae, feeding on the fat body in the larvae. Those eggs will begin hatching. The first few eggs will be male, followed by female mites. They all start feeding on the developing larvae, causing lots of health impacts for that poor bee. Once they're mature enough to reproduce, mating occurs in that capped brood cell. Then once that adult bee is ready to emerge, the mature female mites will emerge alongside it. The immature mites and the males remain in the cell and actually die, but the mites that have reached maturity and mated will go out and they'll find another empty cell in which to reproduce in. Before they do that though, they do jump onto the adult nurse bees and feed for a period of time before they go back into a brood cell in order to complete and continue that reproductive cycle. What are the impacts of Varroa mite on honeybees? You've got impacts on individual bees and then there are impacts on the colony. So for an individual bee that's been fed on via Varroa in a cell before it emerges as an adult, when it does emerge, it weighs less than its counterparts who haven't been fed on. For worker bees, that's around 7%. For drones, it's even higher, between 11 and 19% less weight than a drone that hasn't been fed on via Varroa. So they're significantly smaller. That impacts on their lifespan, so they don't live as long as other bees that haven't been fed on. There are impacts on their cognition. So cognition, the way they think. So they go out, impacts on their flight and navigation. They sometimes don't return, so you get long absences from hives. They get lost or they return without food. So they can't navigate properly and they do poor foraging. There's also an impact for worker bees on their hypopharyngeal gland. That gland is very important for brood feeding. So they can't as effectively produce brood food for the young larvae. So not only are those new larvae being impacted by Varroa, but they're not getting as good quality food from the nurse bees. There's also an impact on the bees' immune function, so they're more open to getting viruses and other diseases. There's also for the colony a breakdown in social cohesion. So because their cognition and thinking ability is affected, they also don't groom each other as much. They don't groom themselves as much. They also don't share food and nectar, so that trophallaxis, that reduces. So there's just a general breakdown in the continuity of how the bees communicate within the hive, which affects the colony. You can also get that leading to what's known as parasitic mite syndrome, where social cohesion is completely lost, other diseases take over, and you get lots of different impacts on the health of the colony. Now, we don't know about PMS in Australia yet because the Varroa that we have luckily doesn't have any viruses. And usually parasitic mite syndrome is associated with viruses. So hopefully we don't start to see that because that's implicated in colony collapse. How does Varroa spread? Well, it spreads naturally over time. Generally, natural spread is quite slow. Bees from colonies have to encounter other bees from infected colonies in order to have a Varroa jump ship and head back to its colony. So that spread just creeps along very slowly. There are other ways that it spreads though, and the main way that it's spread is by beekeepers. So an infected colony, you get drift, so bees in an apiary or a load, you've got one infected hive and bees will drift within an apiary. And so a bee that's infected or a colony that's infected will drift bees into another hive, so you can get natural drift. You can also get robbing. So say a feral colony has been invaded by Varroa, it's weak, it's got other diseases, you've got a beehive, it's sensed a weakness, it's gone out and robbed a colony that's got Varroa mite. Those mites then hitch a ride on your bees back to your hive, and then your hive is infected. And then they can encounter them when they're foraging. So when they're out foraging, sometimes a Varroa can jump ship on another bee and get taken back to a hive. But beekeepers need to be mindful that they can infect other hives by moving equipment, so sharing frames, sharing boxes, interchanging all of that equipment can move Varroa from one hive to another. So it's really important that you're actively monitoring for Varroa in your apiaries. Training and education in this space that we're in, and it's a new space, is absolutely critical. One thing you need to carry on doing is conducting surveillance in the Varroa mite management zone. If you're going to get bees again, you need to be thinking about monitoring, not thinking about doing. You need to be monitoring for Varroa mite in your hives every 16 weeks and reporting those results. So if you find Varroa, letting DPI know. If you're in the Varroa mite suppression zone, so the green zone outside of those orange zones, you still need to be doing your monitoring as well. You are monitoring for mite arrival. We need to know the natural spread of the mite and how far it's gone. So keep up with your surveillance and monitoring, absolutely critical. And then there's treatment. Obviously we're not treating yet, but at some point we will be. There's lots of treatment options, and I'm not going to go through them all here, but there are chemical treatment options, there are mechanical treatment options like drone trapping and splitting. There are cultural methods, so breeding for Varroa resistance, those sorts of things. There's lots of things you can do, but it's important that whatever treatment you do, it's done as part of integrated pest management. So a variety of treatments to help control Varroa. Training and education around all of these things, monitoring and treatment and integrated pest management, will be coming. So don't worry, there is education on the way. What's really, really critical is when you source information, that you source that information from a reputable source. There's lots of things out there on the internet, And there are also lots of treatments that are done in other countries overseas that may or may not be approved for use in Australia. So don't think that you should be applying treatments to hives prophylactically or anything like that. It's really important that you get your information from a reliable source. And right now, the source of truth for education, monitoring, surveillance, and treatment of Varroa mite is DPI. So please make sure that you're not seeking information from sources that are unreliable. For more information about Varroa and other pests and diseases of honeybees, please visit New South Wales DPI or the Tokau College website. On behalf of Tokau College, thank you.